Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you to episode number 93 of the Primetime Rundown right here on the Eastern Observer alongside Mike Szabo, who is down in Greenville, South Carolina. Back home, I'm Joey Jarzynka. We cannot thank you enough for making us a part of your Monday night. It's August 1st. Happy August, ladies and gentlemen. For all of those that are fall fans, we are getting awfully close. But also, Mike, we have to keep in mind, too, it is trade deadline eve in Major League Baseball. Mike, how are things with you down in the Carolinas?
Yeah, going great. I mean, a little vacation down here, but I mean, still so much news coming in between, doing vacationing things and all this summer and all. So, I mean, this is the heart of the season that we all love right before the trade deadline. And man, today has just been a real whirlwind.
Yeah, there's no doubt we can go on and on about this, but we've got so much to talk about and to dissect here on MLB trade deadline eve. Of course, whatever we do not get to, we'll be getting to in tomorrow's instant reaction segment number 19. But first, of course, as we always do, our show is presented to you by Black Cats NYC. Be sure to download their newest hit album called Free Cake, which is out now. Play loud on the following music platforms: Apple Music, YouTube, SoundCloud, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, and of course, Spotify. Mike, we continue on here. Of course, we've got so much to discuss with the National Hockey League. We've got some rumors going around, but of course, we'll save the best for last, if you will. We've got the NFL. We've got Deshaun Watson, who was suspended following some court appearances. We finally got that verdict. Of course, Deebo Samuel re-signed in San Francisco for a massive extension. We'll break that down as well. In addition to, of course, DK Metcalf signed a massive deal to stay in Seattle. And as we did say, we saved the best for last. It is trade deadline eve in Major League Baseball. The New York Yankees did a ton of work here on this Monday evening and this Monday afternoon, of course. The Mets, who knows what they're going to be doing, and the Houston Astros have been keeping up with the New York Yankees in that regard. So let's get things underway here. We've got a packed show, and it's going to be a fun one. Mike Szabo right here on episode number 93. The New York Yankees, we're going to get things started, of course, with the hometown team. And the Yankees, Mike, did a ton of work. They acquired Frankie Montas. They acquired Lou Trevino. They also acquired Scott Effross. They acquired Andrew Benintendi not too long after our show last week concluded. And what we have been seeing here with this New York Yankees squad, they are not giving up. They're 69-34. They look fantastic. What are things that you have gotten to see?
Well, they've really filled a lot of holes that we as Yankee fans have been looking for them to fill, especially the last couple weeks, the last month or so. It's been really, I guess, compared to the way the rest of the season has gone for the Yankees, not such a great July playing 500 baseball. You've seen in games against the Astros or other games in the last couple weeks, particularly in the Subway Series against the Mets, given how both teams are so good this year. There are holes with this team as presently constructed. If they were going to go all the way through October, like the expectation is, they needed to make some big-time additions. And they certainly went out there and did. They got Benintendi early on, way before the deadline, in order to help the outfield, add a contact hitter in between all the power guys we have in the lineup, Judge, and when Stanton certainly comes back. Rizzo's been hitting a lot of home runs as well this year. Then, of course, they got two relievers to fortify the bullpen, both of them today. Effross and Trevino, really, who both have a lot of control. Trevino's more someone on, they like in terms of the deeper stats, as if you just, looked him up and looked up the surface stats, nothing a whole lot really exciting there in terms of his stats this year. But you certainly look a little bit deeper and you look at his skill set. Certainly Matt Blake and the pitching staff, you see why they like him there, being a sinker slider pitcher. And of course, they went out and got Frankie Montas, the big number 2. You knew that the way the rotation has been going, especially in the last month, the Yankees could not miss out on one of these frontline starters. And even though it stunk missing out on Castillo on Friday night, they did go out and get Montas, who his name has not been around the trade market as much due to Castillo's name, and of course Montas dealing with a little bit of shoulder injuries earlier this month. But he's a really good pitcher as well, and the Yankees did well to go out there and grab a name like him.
Frankie Montas is 29 years old, Mike. He's an unrestricted free agent in 2023. He's got 1 year of control left. His win-loss record is not great because he's on one of the worst teams in Major League Baseball, but his ERA is nice and low for, respectable standards. A 3.18 ERA, 4-9 win-loss record, 19 games played, and all of those are starts. 104.2, 104 and 2/3 innings of work this season, and 109 punch-outs. His last start came against the Houston Astros back on the 26th with the A's, and he got 5 innings of work, 7 hits, 3 runs. 2 of those were earned. He did allow a home run, 3 walks, 4 Ks, and a .233 opposing batting average in that contest. He looked fantastic. And then, of course, Lou Trevino, too, who is a Pennsylvania kid, by the way, so he is now coming home. 10 out of 12 save opportunities have been converted for him. 1-6 win-loss record, again, 6.47 ERA, and we can almost, presume that it will definitely go down. Not only the ERA, the save opportunities won't be there because we expect him to go in as a 7th inning or potentially an 8th inning guy. We don't know because of now the new toys that Aaron Boone as well as Matt Blake have to play with. 10 saves, 32 innings of work, and 45 punch-outs. This takes a lot of pressure off of Trevino now. He just comes in, he gets the job done. But also now this could be a little bit of a problem come September. Let's say if Chapman, regardless of the money, Mike, and we can tell you this, I know you want to air out your grievances. We know all about airing out those grievances, Mike, all right? We know all about that. Okay, so that is our new graphic there that we will be keeping on for a long, long time. Mike, air out your grievances about Aroldis Chapman, and is there a possibility now that his position in the bullpen could potentially, now with also Zach Britton also on his way slowly back, now with the acquisition of Montas, you also have Severino on the shelf. But at some point, you're probably going to move a Herman, a Montgomery, or a Jameson Tyone into the pen to be a long relief. And then you might have a little bit of, you might be clogged up in the bullpen. Who's the odd man out? Is it Chapman or is it somebody else? Air out those grievances.
Oh, thank you for reminding me about my grievances of Aroldis Chapman. Oh, my God.
I can tell you this, Mike. I can tell you this. You definitely would not want Aroldis Chapman at Festivus dinner, I would say, right?
Oh, no. If it were up to me, Aroldis Chapman is sitting on the couch right next to me in October. So, I mean, if you want to ask me about a position in the bullpen, I think when we get to the real, thick of the season and the real season, as we'll say, I don't want him being any part of the bullpen. Listen, I think Aroldis Chapman, he was fine years ago. Of course, he's got great numbers as a reliever historically and whatnot, but you've seen postseason after postseason him give up some really big hits that ended the Yankees season, particularly in 2019 against Jose Altuve. 2020 basically gave up the go-ahead home run on Tampa Bay and Mike Brasso in the pandemic playoffs and whatnot. Just gives up those big hits. He just has the tendency to, and it's not just just to the Yankees. When he was traded in 2016 to the Cubs, let's not forget he almost blew the World Series in Game 7, and the Chicago offense had to bail him out.
Raji Davis. Do we remember that? Oh, we remember that name. I know Mike doesn't remember that name, but that name, Raji Davis. Oh, we know all about that. Go on.
I mean, he was literally brought in for that one job to be the closer, to help solidify that bullpen for Chicago, to get them the World Series, and he almost blew it. So he's had, this historical narrative of not pitching well in terms of in the playoffs, in terms of giving up these really big hits. And I'm not going to let 3 good outings in July, 2 of which have come against the Kansas City Royals, convince me that Chapman's going to now be a serious part of the bullpen and whatnot. His velocity as his age is going up. His velocity is not what it used to be on the fastball. His command on the slider has been a bit all over the place, and when that's going, everything you don't want in a closer comes out. His command all over the place, walking guys everywhere, and then He just misses that location on a fastball, which is more 96, 97 than 101 like it used to be. And that one's yard, and that's a big hit given up.
Yeah, I mean, I think also the thing too is that in his defense, right? In Aroldis Chapman's defense too, we remember back in that 2016 World Series run, manager Joe Madden used Aroldis Chapman like or actually pretty much every single game. If you think about it, there were a couple of games, and ever since that playoff, that run really, Chapman has never been the same. And even when he re-signed with the Yankees, he's never been the same. The fastball you rarely have seen it go up to Cuban Missile status, what he was once donned when he was with Cincinnati. It's very difficult to see with what Chapman has been struggling with, which, as you said, the command has not been there, and also the velocity that has not really been there either on the fastball either. But then again, he's getting older. He's getting older. That's definitely something else too. But we did say, Mike, though, when this contract was signed, and a lot of folks have said it, is that in the back end of the contract, it will be a little bit of a problem. And unfortunately, they still have a couple of more years until that contract is done.
Well, at this point, I believe is he either a free agent at the end of this year or next year? I believe he is in his walk year. So, I mean, either way, he's going to be gone. So the Yankees were not going to re-sign him past this contract. But luckily for them, they do have depth elsewhere. It's just that I don't see Chapman being a serious part about it in terms of the velocity as well. The last time you probably saw, Cuban Missile style velocity was probably 2019. So the like we said, the velocity hasn't been there, and I mean we'll see what if he's able to get some really strong outings in the next couple of games and weeks and whatnot. We know Boone really loves him, so maybe he does rise up in the reliever rankings again. As much as I wouldn't like it, but we'll see. All it takes is a couple more outings, and maybe he regains his place in the trust tree. I just don't think that's a good idea long term for the Yankees.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, just by looking that up to clarification, Aroldis Chapman is done after this year. He is a unrestricted free agent at the end of 2022. So that's definitely a good chance that he will no longer be on the roster. But again, just because of that $16 million cap hit right now, I don't expect him to be an odd man out or designated for assignment. I really don't see that. I expect I would have expected him to potentially be thrown into a trade now. I still don't know, though, who's going to take that contract on. Who will, at this point in time, take on $16 million? I don't see it. And the only team that I could potentially see would be a San Diego.
Yeah, I mean, no contender really wants him, and you'd be owed $6 million the rest of the year. I mean, I don't really see anybody taking him on. I think there are other places if the Yankees are gonna open up roster spots, there are other places for them to go to. What happens with Miguel Andujar? We know last month he requested a trade. What happens with Domingo Germán, who they've opted over J.P. Sears, who was just traded today, and then Clark Schmidt to be the spot starter in Luis Severino's position. So clearly they like Germán, but do they make room for him? Do they clear a couple of things on the deck in terms of reliever, with who they brought in today? So there could be a couple of roster decisions they may make and some more minor moves.
Well, looking back at the return, Mike, for the Oakland Athletics, there is a pitcher there, a lefty, that you really wanted this Yankees team to keep. But then again, when you look at the Yankees' top prospects, the top 4 prospects in all of these deals that were made, including Andrew Benintendi, which we'll get to in a few moments, Brian Cashman did not part with a single one. You'd have to call that a win. But unfortunately, the number 5 prospect in the Yankee system, Ken Waldichuk, was dealt along with right-handed pitcher Luis Medina, the number 10 Yankees prospect, as well as J.P. Sears, a left-handed pitcher who's the number 20 prospect in the Yankee system. We did see up at the big league level a little bit this year, as well as second baseman Cooper Bowman, the number 21 overall Yankees prospect. It's not really that big of a haul, but really the wild card in that, or really the grand prize in that, is Ken Waldichuk, the number 5 prospect. What do you see with him that you had wished, obviously, would potentially could have been still Yankees property?
Well, I mean, he was a really strong minor league pitcher, and he was scheduled to probably be, in the rotation next year. The big thing about him was great velocity and just the combination of pitches as well as a lefty, which, I mean, Joey, just off the top of your head, when was the last time the Yankees have developed a great power pitching left-handed, left-handed arm?
Yeah.
It's been a while since they've been able to do that, and yet, in general, whether it was Waldichuk or whether it was other pitchers in this Montas deal or their deadline deals overall, the Yankees really went to trading a lot of their arms, which is the strength of the system. The last 2 years, they've really drafted a lot of pitching, and and Cashman was able to negotiate trading a lot of the great hitters in the system that he has in order to deal a lot of the arms that they have in the top 30 of the system. And Waldichuk headlined that. And listen, it's not going to stop them from, nor would I want it to stop them from making a Frankie Montas deal. Ken Waldichuk shouldn't stop them from making the kind of move that they need to help the team now in Frankie Montas. But just a good prospect that I think the A's got back there. But once again, I don't think it should behoove the Yankees from getting Montas, who I think will be a really good number 2 for the Yankees.
Also, to answer your question, who the last left-handed pitcher there was, the last one I could really think of, to really be the top pitcher most recently, is Andy Pettitte.
Yeah.
If you really think about a top powerful pitcher, especially a southpaw, it would be Andy Pettitte.
And then the only one who's really cracked the major leagues in general would be Jordan Montgomery recently. Yeah. That's been it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's keep on moving forward here on deadline eve for Major League Baseball. We still have so much to talk about. The Yankees, they did acquire Andrew Benintendi. They also acquired Scott Effross from the Kansas City Royals and the Cubs, respectively. Mike, we got a chance to see Scott Effross. This kid is something that not a lot of folks probably knew about. He is 28 years old. He has a pretty good wicked sinker and a slider. But something else too, Mike, he's also a sidearmer. Now, I don't know if you remember this. Now, back when I was a kid, there was a pitcher by the name of Mike Myers who was a sidearmer. And for all the Yankees fans that are out there, I know Mike doesn't remember him. But I can tell you that Ian Schraier would know, and Rob DeLuca would 100% know as well. And our good friend Casey Bryant would know as well. Mike Myers was a pretty good left-handed sidearm pitcher. Here, you've got a right-handed sidearm pitcher who, mind you, comes in with a 2.66 ERA, 44 innings of work, and he's in the 95th percentile. Now, get this, 95th percentile in chase rate, expected ERA, and a barrel rate, which is pretty good. You don't typically see that a lot, and this kid is one of the best young relief pitchers in the game, and the Yankees got him for right-handed pitcher Hayden Wesneski, who is the number 7 prospect in the Yankee system. Again, Mike, I tell you this, the top 4 prospects are still Yankees property. How good of a deal is this?
Oh, fantastic by Cashman. I mean, sure, you have to give up a top 10 prospect, but you had to give in order to get a guy like Effross, who has had a really good rookie season for Chicago, and that's the main basis of it. You had to trade a top 10 prospect because you're getting a reliever with so much control from Chicago. And, just as you mentioned, 28 years old, a 2.66 ERA, and he's not going to be a free agent until 2028. Clearly, the Yankees really like what he has, not only to help deepen the bullpen for this year, but to be a stable of the bullpen to build around for years to come.
Yeah, I mean, and again, you look at what this Wesneski kid had. He had 19 starts in AAA in Scranton Wilkes-Barre, 24 years old, same exact stuff, sinker and slider. He also can add a four-seam fastball and a cutter in there as well. So a little bit more on the shopping list that Wisniewski can potentially provide a young and rebuilding Cubs team in the future. But I think the big thing also with this kid Efros is that when you look at a player like a Nestor Cortez coming up against this Matt Blake man, who not a lot of people knew and really thought that he was going to be the savior for a lot of these Yankees pitchers. A lot of these no-name pitchers, such as Nestor Cortez, not only making an all-star team, or an all-star appearance rather, but a lot of these young players, Clay Holmes, Michael King, they have really excelled in Matt Blake's system and under the tutelage of Aaron Boone as well, and the entire clubhouse. It's really looked well, and I would not be surprised if this Scott Efros kid from the Cubs, not only did you say he still has another 5 years of control after this year, but he could be a really big part of what this team has in store. And again, we have to keep in mind too is that there's only 13 pitchers allowed on a roster. That's a big deal. And that's the part where when we brought up, and we can circle back to the whole Chapman thing, that could potentially have some there could be some issues and some tough decisions to make. A good problem that Aaron Boone might just have, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. I think on the Chicago end, I thought it was particularly interesting that they dealt Efros, given the fact that they are rebuilding and he's more of a rookie with a lot of control. You would have thought for the Cubs that, this would be the last guy on the market that,
right,
to be one of the younger pieces you're trying to center the rebuild around in the bullpen and whatnot. But the Yankees really liked what they saw there with Efros. Supposedly the word was that they've been scouting him all year and, dealt enough of a prospect high enough in Wisniewski that Chicago wind up biting and trading Efros here. And the interesting thing is both Efros and Trevino, that the two relievers that the Yankees acquired today, both kind of sinker slider pitchers that Matt Blake really likes. And we obviously see the success that he's been able to generate with Clay Holmes. So clearly trying to maybe duplicate that to a certain extent.
Yeah, exactly. And not only duplicate it, but he's trying to clone exactly that times 3, times 4. Who knows also? And keep in mind, too, there's still another 23 hours left until the trade deadline. I would not be surprised if the Yankees are done. But after the Luis Severino news that he was put onto the 60-day IL, I would not be surprised, though, if the phone is still up to the ear of Brian Cashman trying to find one more move. I would not be surprised also if we do see a Joey Gallo departure and potentially someone to tag along with him, maybe to get a player to be named later, future consideration, something along those lines. And potentially we continuously hear too, Mike, that San Diego is a preferred spot for Joey Gallo. Could you see that happen in the next 23 hours?
Yeah, we've seen interest before from San Diego. I could definitely see that. Of course, San Diego originally wanted to trade for Joey Gallo last summer, so clearly the interest is still there despite his bad year and a half with the Yankees. So it would not surprise me, although we also hear a lot about Juan Soto and whatnot, and the Padres are intensifying the talks there. I mean, that would be quite a consolation deal for missing out on Juan Soto would be Joey Gallo. I mean, that's quite the drop-off there, but certainly a team, whether it's the Padres or whoever takes on Gallo, hope it's just he couldn't work in New York sort of thing, and they're able to build him back up to be more of the Texas Rangers version of Joey Gallo. So really just buying low on him.
Well, keep in mind too, we know plenty of players who simply cannot play in New York, whether it be for the Mets, whether it be for the Yankees, right? We know about Sonny Gray. We know about Randy Johnson. Hey, we even know about Shohei Ohtani too, where Ohtani's numbers, his ERA in the Bronx is absolutely disgraceful. It's in the 6s and the 7s. So, and that's something else too that's a little scary too, was that you had Brian Cashman make a phone call to LA, to the Angels, to see what the availability was and potentially made a serious offer for Ohtani. We'll probably never know what that offer was. But he made from what we were told, from what we saw, Jeff Pass and Ken Rosenthal, all of the big boys, they said that the Yankees were one of the teams to make a really aggressive push and a serious offer. I don't know if that really would have worked, given the fact that Ohtani has been really bad in the Bronx.
I don't know what the level of serious to Brian Cashman may be a lot different to the rest of us. So I don't know. I think he really loves the term due diligence. So I think is probably just checking in and whatnot. Although when we hear it from all the big sources and whatnot, passing and whatnot, there's serious interest, but I don't think it really developed to any serious point. And I mean, listen, Ohtani, he's got a bad ERA in the Bronson, sure, whatnot, but I mean, don't tell me you'd be denying wanting him on this team.
Yeah, I mean, listen, that would be the second time that this Yankees team has a generational player, and the reason why we say that is because you look at the other two-way player that the Yankees had, and that was Babe Ruth, way back when, nearly 90 years ago. So that could have potentially have been, to keep history alive and to keep it going, where they could have about 90 years later, they have another two-way player, which would have cost the Yankees an arm and a leg for sure, and most likely would have cost potentially two, if not more, of their top four prospects that the Yankees still have in control. So we'll have to see what comes with that at some point. Potentially, that sounds to me like a winter meetings type deal that Ohtani will be a part of and probably dangled with, again, around those winter meeting times or winter meeting talks in San Diego this year. But sticking here with trade deadline, Mike, we still had a lot more to go. The Yankees acquired Frankie Montas. That's another big deal. But then, of course, we continue on here, going back out to the aforementioned San Diego. They acquired Josh Hader. And that was a big deal, too. When we saw that news, I was very surprised that was the case. Because when you say to yourself, Josh Hader, you immediately think Brew Crew. You think the Milwaukee Brewers. And keep in mind, too, they're also in first place in the NL Central. This was a odd trade, but there was no margin of error, according to the Milwaukee Brewers, because the moment he had a 9 ERA in the month of July, Mike, he was gone.
Yeah, I mean, it's very strange. This move for Josh Hader completely came out of left field. There was no reports, in the past 2 to 3 days or whatnot that something was building, something was brewing, no pun intended. But this all just came about suddenly this morning. And all of a sudden, the Brewers trade away their all-star closer to San Diego. And you wonder if it's, no margin for error, or there was certainly the issue when Hader was first coming up is his durability, especially when it comes to his strange and, really violent delivery and whatnot. There was always the conversation early on, is that sustainable? Could he wind up being injury prone or have a shortened career because of it? Maybe Milwaukee doesn't feel like his arm is what it used to be and are just selling on him. The interesting thing about it for San Diego is they did not deal a lot of their top end prospects in order to get Hader. So the Brewers really, swung and missed on that trade. By Hader's standards and the kind of relief pitcher that he's been historically, they sort of sold low a little bit on there. And the Padres still have a lot of the high end prospects in their farm system intact to make a lot of other maneuvers if they so choose.
See, but I think also you have to realize too, with what Taylor Rogers brings to the table as well. You look and see what he's done this year as well. He's got 28 saves. He is really the closer for San Diego at the time. You look and say to yourself, well, that's pretty much the big return was Taylor Rogers, because now you also have Devin Williams, who looks to be probably on his way into that closer's role for Craig Counsell. And now where does that leave Taylor Rogers? Well, I would say probably it would bring him into an 8th inning role. And then you move this young up-and-coming guy in Williams into the closer's role. But then there's also a few more, though, that the Brewers acquired. They acquired left-handed pitcher Robert Gasser, who is San Diego's number seven prospect, back of the rotation guy. Esteury Ruiz, an outfielder, as well as, and this is a name who we have not heard in a few years, Dinelson Lamet. Dinelson Lamet years ago, I remember he was, and this was during the COVID year too, Mike. He got a few Cy Young votes. He was undefeated. He was, I think it was like 6 or 7-0 or even 8-0 at one point. Now, ever since then, he fell off the wagon. He's now with a 9.49 ERA, 13 games played, all in relief appearances. So, and then you also have this Ruiz kid, 14 games played, 222 batting average, 2 ribbies for the Major League Ball Club. I don't want to say that it is a one-sided deal or anything along those lines. I think this was a closer for closer deal, and it looks also as if that John Gonzalez, too, thank you very much for chiming in. He says the Hader trade was all about money. The Brewers were due to pay him $15 million next year. That's a lot to assume on your payroll for a reliever. And not only that, too, it's definitely something, too. Thank you, John Gonzalez, for not only watching, but also commenting, too. That's also something, too, when you see your closer with someone in Devin Williams really coming in with a flame and a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah,
you could save that much money too. That's a good point, John Gonzalez. That's definitely a good point, Mike. You want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I think it's just the money plus, do the Brewers really have trust in Hader long term in his arm? Is there something that we don't know that Milwaukee knows about Hader there that, along with wanting to get rid of the money, is there an injury sort of concern or durability sort of concern as well attached to the $15 million that they would have to pay him that they want to move off of?
Yeah, it's definitely possible to see what has been, and again, keep in mind too, you also look at, and Gasser is a top prospect. Yeah, he is a top prospect. He's also the number 7 prospect in the San Diego system as well. So, I mean, it's definitely a solid trade. But again, when you look at it from the start, it's a wow decision, especially how Josh Hader has been performing not only this month, but just generally over the last few years. He's been a big part of their, we'll call them, playoff appearances. The Brewers really have not been great in the playoffs. We know about that. You also look and say, go on.
I mean, still, it's a first-place team, and you often don't see deals like this where, it's their all-star reliever, an excellent closer for them the last couple of years, and they're in first place this year, and you see him being dealt to another contender. Usually you don't see these sort of deals, but yes, it's certainly a solid deal. They wanted to get the money off. They got a solid return in terms of a top 10 prospect plus a guy in Rogers who could slide into the closer role. But in terms of the Padres, they have a lot of the top prospects in terms of if they want to go for bigger fish, which is why, they're still in conversations about Juan Soto. Usually you would have thought even a year ago, even a month ago, going in for a deal for Josh Hader would take away the prospect capital that you would need to go after a Soto or a starter or whatever the Padres may do that would cost a substantial amount. Instead, yes, they do give up a number 7 prospect. They give up a solid closer in Rogers in order to bring in Hader, but they certainly have the maneuverability to make some more transactions.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And also, too, something else, too, is that in addition to what John Gonzalez did say about the Hader trade, $15 million for next year as well, Taylor Rogers is a free agent at the end of this year, too. So that's a big deal. Keep that in mind, too, is that that money would come off the books for really both teams now. You also get to see what Houston has been doing, too. We move a little bit towards the Southeast. And Houston made a 3-team deal, Mike. Houston, Baltimore, and Tampa Bay. Houston acquired the main fish, obviously, or the big fish in that deal was Trey Mancini from Baltimore and also right-handed pitcher Jaden Murray from Tampa Bay. Tampa also acquired Jose Siri from Houston. That was their big fish, and the Orioles acquired a pair of prospects, Seth Johnson and Chase McDermott, a 3-team deal. Trey Mancini, of course, you get a chance to say goodbye just a few days ago. He did it in pretty good fashion. out at Camden Yards. Houston now reloads. Yuli Gurriel has not really had that great of a year. You plug Mancini in over at first. He looks great. And keep in mind, too, he looked pretty good in a really, really lowly Baltimore Orioles lineup. And now you plug him in here with Bregman, Brantley, Tucker, the list Altuve. The list goes on.
Yeah, I mean, as much as we talked about at the beginning of the show with the Yankees loading up, Houston has really matched them and, added a couple of bats today. Mancini, a really strong at bat, a really strong bat to add. We know his versatility playing first base, like you said about Gurriel underachieving this year, can also play the outfield if needed. And he's done really well in a Baltimore lineup that's been pesky this year, but certainly nowhere near what Houston is with the lights of players that they have. Like you said, Altuve, Bregman, Alvarez, Tucker, Brantley, the list goes on. And, it's just going to, he already has pretty solid production. And you expect in a lineup like that, the production's really going to uptick and provide really strong balance for Houston, especially toward the latter part of their lineup. In their offense, stabilize their offense going down the stretch. Certainly, especially with the acquisition of Vasquez that I know we'll get to, that really helps the bottom of their lineup, which for various reasons, injuries or inconsistency and whatnot, bottom of their lineup's been lacking a little bit.
You look and say to yourself what Mancini brings to this Houston lineup. This year, he's hitting .268 with a .347 slugging, .404 on base percentage, 10 home runs in 2022. He missed 2020 because he was, of course, battling cancer. In his entire career, .270 batting average, .334 slugging, and a .463 on base percentage. His career home run total also is 117. That's another big deal. Trey Mancini looks fantastic in this lineup, Mike. This is something that, again, they pretty much had to counter after the Yankees made some moves too. And think about it. That's pretty much what it's going to be. It's, if the cards are played right, it will be Houston and the Yankees. So the Yankees got Benintendi, and now Houston has Trey Mancini. And as you brought up, Christian Vasquez, who Boston traded to Houston not too long ago, just a few moments actually before we went live. So let's hear a little bit about Christian Vasquez to this already daunting Houston lineup.
Well, of course, Vasquez was a World Series champion with the 2018 edition of the Red Sox, and it's a really good catcher for them there. And he's not going to, be an otherworldly presence in the lineup and, be this dominating hitter and whatnot. But he's going to be a solid veteran that provides a little bit of pop for the production toward the bottom of the lineup, which has been a little bit inconsistent for Houston. Which, listen, as great as the top half of the lineup has been with Alvarez, who's a legitimate AL MVP candidate, Bregman, of course, an all-star the past couple of years, Altuve, we know what he brings, and Michael Brantley as well. The bottom part of the lineup at times doesn't have the greatest of production. They bring in a good veteran catcher that can provide a little bit more production than someone like a Martin Maldonado.
You keep on looking here and you say to yourself, well, how much more does Houston have in store? And how did they come out with a couple of trades? You look at the Mancini trade once more, and John Gonzalez, he says, quote, Houston made out in this trade. Johnson, the pitcher, the Orioles got is scheduled for Tommy John surgery. And then also Siri too, is another Joey Gallo who strikes out a lot. So, that's definitely something else, too, that we'll have to keep our eyes out on. But again, the big thing was were obviously the prospects in Houston, where it was able to get all of the major league players that would be able to provide an immediate impact. And then, of course, John, the Mets had shown interest in Vasquez. Let's see if they get JD Martinez. Well, it's very funny you bring that up, because there's a lot of folks that did not that would have potentially had an absolute hashtag Mets Twitter meltdown if the Mets had gotten Tommy Pham, but instead the Red Sox got him for a player to be named later, Mike. And this whole This whole Red Sox, we can quote unquote, I guess we can call it a sale. That's what Jeff Passan called it. I don't believe that it's a sale. If we're really talking about a sale, then I think Bogarts would have been traded as well.
Yeah, I think I know we were talking about it last week, how I didn't think the Red Sox would sell. They've opted for at least a little bit of a soft sell the way that things are going. And certainly, like I said last week, things would really have to start picking up for them to go into buy mode and still try and go for it to squeeze into the postseason. Obviously, that has not happened. So they've really opted to, they shopped Vasquez today. They're certainly talking about Martinez, and sounds like we'd be shocked if he's still a Red Sox by the end of the night. But they haven't really gotten minor leaguers in return. They really haven't gotten, a hauls of players that, they expect to, build a future with, or, stash in the minor leagues for the next year or two and, develop them and bring them up to the major league level. We really haven't seen a lot of that. They traded for, major league level talent. They bring in Tommy Pham, who probably, assuming, the Martinez news will eventually come in, will probably replace Martinez for the rest of the year. And so they really haven't gotten, major hauls or added to their farm system or whatnot. They've really just attacked, major league talent in some of these deals that they're selling players off on. It's interesting. Bogarts has an opt out at the end of the year. So, like you mentioned, if they really were going for a hard sell, you would have expected them to probably shop Rafi Devers, who's a free agent at the end of the year, and Xander Bogaerts a little harder. So I think they're really trying to find a middle ground between selling while still trying to keep some solid pieces in there to reload and contend next year.
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, too, I think it's also really presumptuous to say that a Red Sox sale is beginning. Like, I understand where Jeff Passan is coming from in saying Red Sox, the Sox sale is beginning. I get it.
Like, when have we said those two words in the last decade with the Red Sox?
Yeah, exactly. It simply doesn't happen. I mean, hey, we did see it when they shipped Adrian Gonzalez all the way out west, when they shipped Josh Beckett out west. We remember all of those days. I could tell you our guest or our viewer, John Gonzalez, probably remembers that too. That was the last time that I can really think of. And also, of course, most recently too, when Mookie Betts was shipped out to LA, and for Alex Verdugo, for Jeter Downs, that was pretty much a retool, if you will. And then, now I don't know. I think that with what the Red Sox are doing, though, I think that it's pretty much exactly what you said. They're trying to stay competitive in a really tough spot in this AL East that is beginning to get out of reach or out of hand very quickly, not in favor of this Red Sox team. You look back, Mike, at the Christian Vasquez deal, going back to Boston, or rather probably to Worcester and to Pawtucket, are two players, Emmanuel Valdez and Wilyer Abreu. Both are batters. Valdez is a AAA third baseman. That's something else too. Right now he's really crushing it in AAA. 327 batting average, 410 slugging and 606 on base percent. 21 home runs between AA and AAA, 249 batting average, and 15 home runs in AAA for Abreu as well. So, or rather in AA, for Abreu. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to venture to say that this is a team that is definitely going to contend for next year. And John does say, yep, he definitely does remember. And he also says, good point, Mike, as well. Going back to another deal, looks like that the Red Sox have made. Catcher Reese McGuire heading over to the Red Sox. We also did say that the Red Sox are trading for Tommy Pham as well. Now, we bring that up once more because when you say to yourself, or when you look at Passan's tweet, right, and, for the general baseball fan, the Sox sale has begun, and you acquire a Tommy Pham who, you would think that regardless of a player to be named later, why would they be trading for really anybody when you're trying to, again, be in that middle ground when you have a pretty solid lineup?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think not to assume anything, but again, I think Pham is just to replace JD Martinez if he does potentially get traded. And they just really add another major leaguer to stay competitive. They added Reese McGuire to replace Christian Vasquez at the catcher position. So it's really intriguing how Kyle Bloom is really maneuvering all of this and whatnot, and trying to stay competitive. Pham is probably not someone that's going to last past this year. Maybe they move him in the winter and whatnot again. But also at the same time selling off some of these veterans.
Yeah, you look at what Tommy Pham has brought to this really low Cincinnati Reds team. 11 home runs, 81 hits, 238 batting average, 57 runs, 39 ribbies, 7 stolen bases, on-base percentage of 320, and a 374 slugging with a 694 OPS. This is definitely a player that really can, potentially come in and, I don't want to say do some damage. He is a right-handed bat. You would have to think after acquiring Tommy Pham, though, that JD Martinez is below, his hefty contract will probably be on the way out. I would have to say, Mike.
Yeah, I would think so too. I mean, we just to bring the Mets into the conversation that we started them off with. It was rumored to be that Martinez and Vasquez would have been a package deal wherever they went, and that didn't wind up to be the case with Vasquez going to Houston. It looks like Martinez is still being shopped around and the deal hasn't been made yet. So you would think, bringing in Pham, he's obviously a solid major leaguer. It would be to replace a JD Martinez. Otherwise, there's really not too much sense for the move when they already have, Christian Arroyo playing the outfield a little bit, Jackie Bradley Jr., Alex Verdugo as well.
Jeter Downs.
Downs. It's really strange if Martinez does stay. Where does Pham fit for this team the next couple of months? So you'd think Martinez is on the way out. Now, for all Mets fans, they are hoping that is to Queens. Otherwise, you've seen a couple of guys pass along. Certainly, it sounds like the Contreras-Robertson package hasn't been getting positive news the last couple days. We'll see if they're still in on that or not. We haven't really heard much about Brandon Drury, which we felt like we heard a little bit more about a couple weeks ago. So the Mets certainly could they have a big hole there in designated hitter. And I know, most people don't expect, Daniel Vogelbach to fill it long term. He should be more for depth. So there's certainly a hole there to fill at designated hitter for the New York Mets. And if it's not JD Martinez, they're going to have to really pivot quick. And, I don't know if there's a better guy that you can get. Maybe Contreras. He's an all-star catcher and whatnot. You split catcher and DH, of course, depending on the day with the more defensive Nito, all that sort of stuff. That conversation's for another day, of course. But, then you look at Martinez as well. He's a really strong veteran. Sure, he's been up and down, but he's a strong veteran and, fills that DH spot and, of course, is a World Series champion. So, I think the Mets, if they don't land Martinez, it's going to be a little bit of a panic time there. And what are they doing at this deadline?
Yeah, absolutely. And then you also look at with what has gone on, which we'll get to the Mets in a few short moments, because there's still a lot to talk about with them too. So it looks as if also that right now there is no other, surprisingly, update right now, which I guarantee you for all of the folks that know about our show, especially in the summer, there's always a deal or breaking news that goes down once the show goes off the air. That's just how it is. And you know what? The sad part is that it even happens to right around Christmas time too. It's pretty much like a bucket of coal that we get, pretty much every time that there's a show at the end of a Friday night, of course, episode, which very unfortunate, Mike. Let's keep on moving here. And you know what? You brought up the Mets. Let's stay on the Mets here. It looks to me that we're going to see Jacob deGrom tomorrow. That's a big deal. And something else too, that just before we get to DeGrom, because we want to stay on here, I did not see this this quote here from John. John Gonzalez, one more time. The rumor has it that the Boston Red Sox are asking for Mark Vientos from the Mets. Now, that's a big deal. That is a top prospect for the Mets, and we've heard a lot of rumors already. Andy Martino, from Bob Nightingale, from a whole bunch of guys, that the Mets are not willing to part with these top prospects, Mike. And, now that if the rumor is correct that John Gonzalez has been talking about, that's a big deal. That's a very big deal, and that could potentially throw a wrench into Billy Epler's plans.
And it's a real stickler, to give up a really top prospect like that for Martinez, who I believe is a rental.
Yes.
It's a really high price that the Red Sox are asking for. It feels like certainly the market was set really high with, of course, Castillo Friday night. You've seen the market set pretty high in a couple other deals as well. The Red Sox are really aiming high in terms of what they can get in terms of the return for Martinez. And listen, I think that's a really high price for them to for them to pay and to get Vientos. Now, maybe you would be comfortable with dealing Vientos and other deals, whether it be Contreras or whatnot, or some other deal out there for someone who can fit the designated hitter role. But it's going to be a real conversation that Billy Epler is going to have, dealing a top prospect in their system like Vientos in a deal like this. I just don't know if they're comfortable with paying that kind of price. And I think that's really the big stickler for the Mets at this point.
Yeah, and now obviously going back to what we were discussing earlier, it looks as if our old friend Tyler Adele does agree with us, going back to some of the stuff with the when breaking news does hit, it hits immediately after our show goes off the air. 9:01, Juan Soto will get dealt. LOL. Yeah, that probably will happen, and then we'll have to scramble quickly. We'll have to get Mike out of the hotel bar, get back up to his room, and we'll have to have our instant reaction. But of course, ladies and gentlemen, please be aware that we do have social media. We will let you know when that does come to fruition, the instant reaction, that is. Hopefully it's not tonight, so Mike can enjoy himself tonight, and we'll be back on the air tomorrow to discuss a whole bunch of stuff within the trade deadline and 2022 trade deadline. Let's keep on moving forward here. Now we can finally get to what we were talking about, Mets fans. Jacob deGrom is going to make his season debut tomorrow. That's a big deal. Consider that a deadline acquisition for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, there's really not anyone more impactful on the market that you can really get. And instead, the Mets are, making their, quote unquote, deadline acquisition, and deGrom coming off the injured list. There's really not anyone that you could find that's more impactful on the market than what Jacob deGrom is. And, they're bringing him in, and you hope that the health is really good. I feel like this is a conversation that really doesn't get talked about enough, and how the last 2 years or so, deGrom has dealt with a lot of injuries, and of course the harder throwing style that he's, increasingly developed and whatnot as time goes on, especially the last 2 years, how much of a hard thrower he's become. And, he's paid with the price with quite a bit of injury trouble. And, he dealt with this year, but now you hope, as Mets fan, he's coming back at a really good time. And this entire time, the Mets have been able to do really well, have a really strong season, do really well in the division, currently holding a 3-game lead. And now you're getting your ace back, and you hope that there's no health issues, no health setbacks, and you have Jacob deGrom now for a stretch run, and now through the postseason, which will really give them a fearsome 1-2 with deGrom and Scherzer. There really won't be a better 1-2 punch in the playoffs than that if they continue to be healthy. And then, of course, the rest of the Mets rotation has been pretty solid in their own right.
See, but that's the thing, though, right? That's the thing that scares a lot of people, is a big if. Folks that are watching, put it in the comments. Do you believe that Jacob deGrom can last a season? Can he last? And when I say a season for him, it's about 2 months. And oddly enough, it's August 1. Can he last a full postseason run? Put it in the comments here, and we'll definitely show we'll show some of your comments. That's toughy, Mike, because Jacob deGrom, again, there's also those rumors that they weren't shot down, but they were not really brought up at all, though, that if deGrom, or rather if and when deGrom opts out, the favorites to land deGrom are the Atlanta Braves. Now, wouldn't that be a bit spicy for that?
Talk about storylines there.
Not only storyline, Mike, that would be a little bit spicy for the rivalry.
Yeah, I mean, quite the division matchup that would be next year if that were the case. But if you're the Mets, you got to hope that deGrom's healthy. You know, they have issues in terms of the bullpen that haven't been entirely addressed. We've talked about the DH here on in the last couple moments. Certainly having deGrom back is going to be a huge must, not really to get through the rest of the regular season. They've been doing just fine with that, but certainly to contend in the postseason and go all the way, they're really going to need him.
Yeah, and again, now that Montas is off the market, Castillo is off the market, and now we can even look into the bullpen too, because the bullpen for the Mets, not everyone not named Edwin Diaz, has not really looked that great. They've looked pretty good, of course, against the Yankees, but again, when you look and say to yourself, we saw last Wednesday, right, when Gleyber Torres tied the game on a 2-run shot against David Peterson, who came in for Max Scherzer, things look good there for the number 2 starter, which is crazy to say that Scherzer's the number 2 starter, but he will be come tomorrow. When you have that home run off of Peterson or whoever it may be, you need help in the pen. Who do the Mets pivot to now? And again, you said it too. We're coming up to about 22 hours until the trade deadline.
Yeah,
we've got to do something.
Yeah, he has to. We know they weren't going to be in on Castillo or Montas, a lot of the front-end starters, because they obviously believe in, with how good deGrom is, that obviously there's going to be no issues there, that he's going to be really healthy. But, just to move off of that, to the bullpen issues, I mean, other than Adam Ottavino's been really solid for them this year, other than him and Edwin Diaz, those are your two that you right now in the bullpen, you're going to go with the rest of this season and the rest of the postseason. Edwin Diaz, Adam Ottavino. There are a lot of question marks the rest of the way, and we really have not heard a lot of conversation about what the Mets can or will do in that area of the field. They talked about David Robertson in a package with Wilson Contreras. Of course, Andrew Chafin is the name out there and whatnot. That's really picked up in the last 12 to 24 hours or so. Really good reliever the last 2 years or so, especially with the Detroit Tigers. He would be a really good addition, but they really need an addition here for the bullpen, the Mets. Otherwise, you're really expecting the starters to go a long way, which, especially in the postseason, depending how a game is playing, pitch count, we get into all those sort of matchup stuff, could really be tricky. And they really don't have a lot of depth in the bullpen, and you need at least one name they need to trade for.
Yeah, and something that I like here, and also our good friend Tyler Riddell staying with us here and commenting throughout our broadcast. Thank you for doing that. Tyler writes this down, leaning toward no solely based on injury history. Not solely based on injury history. I think he forgot the T there. But it has been a while, in my opinion, parentheses IMO, in my opinion, since deGrom had a solid bullpen with him that can keep his innings down if needed and potentially relieve some stress off his arm, limiting the 7+ innings outings. I completely agree with this, because when you look and say to yourself how much this player in Jacob deGrom, who's been one of the faces of your franchise, the face of your franchise for how many years? Do we remember how many times? And we can ask Ian Schraier this too. He would throw something at his computer when we speak about this. How many times has Jacob deGrom not had the run support? And he's been in line for a win every single time. He is one of the worst players in Major League history with run support. It's so unfortunate. And not only that, too, exactly what Tyler said, too. He's had to stay in. Tyler wrote down, calculators can't count that high. It's true. When you have this player go all the way because you simply cannot rely on an Edwin Diaz at the time. You simply cannot rely on the rest of your bullpen at the time. A Huri's Familia, Rafael Montero, whoever it may be.
Yeah.
You need help. You need help. And now I think at this point, Mike, I think not only that, I think what to you, is it relief pitcher or is it a batter that you need more so?
Well, I think so. The problem with we've seen a couple years, a couple years ago with the Mets, where they really needed, whether it was DeGrom or any other starter in the staff, they really needed every pitcher to at least go 6 or 7 innings at the minimum in order to be able to have a shot to win at that game because the bullpen was so leaky. Now that has not been the case this year. It hasn't been so bad. Of course, the emergence of Diaz being almost unhittable this year has played a major part of it. But, they still have question marks around that bullpen. It's not supremely leaky bad, but it certainly could use a tweak here or there. I think in terms of, what they need, more so than, what's more of the need, a bat or relief pitcher, it's a really tough conversation. How much do they expect the great offense to translate over to the playoffs and whatnot? I say a relief pitcher is just a little bit more of the need. You've seen a little bit of pop from JD Davis every now and then that, maybe they do want to rely on him or whatnot. They have had a really strong offense this year, regardless. We talked about early on, they've been the type of offense that's really good contact, really able to grind out a pitch count and put balls in play. I think that plays well in the postseason that, them really adding a bat can really fill their DH hole and solidify a really good offense. But I think a reliever is more of a need to have some more pitching depth and to be able to get through the playoffs and navigate some really dangerous lineups that are in the National League. You look at the Dodgers, you look at the Padres, even the Braves, if they have to get through them to outlast them in this division race, and certainly if they do, wind up facing them in the playoffs along the way. The Cardinals as well, of course, have a potential MVP candidate in Goldschmidt. Obviously not as strong of a lineup as the other ones I previously mentioned, but there's really strong lineups in the National League that they're going to have to carve around in order to get to the World Series. And I think, they need a little bit of relief help and some pitching depth in order to get there, a little bit more so than a bat.
Yeah, and I also love too how Tyler put it too, where keep the innings down if needed. And I personally believe too, at some point that is definitely being secretly discussed. And I think if you tell me that it's not being secretly discussed, I think you're a fool. Not gonna lie to you. And I think any Mets fan can honestly agree there too. This man cannot stay out. When's the last time that Jacob deGrom played a full season?
You're going back, maybe 2019, 2018.
And even then, we don't even remember. We can't even think of it off the top of our head. Yeah. It's tough. It's tough without an injured list stint.
And then you bring up the other conversations as well. Chris Bassett doesn't have a lot of postseason experience. How will Taijuan Walker translate as well, getting toward the postseason and whatnot? So, there's that conversation as well. I think that, the lack of experience toward the back end. Of course, Carlos Carrasco is going to come in, very huge in this aspect in terms of his experience toward the back end. But certainly Bassett and Taijuan Walker, especially, how their postseason experience will wind up coming into play, will be a huge key for the Mets and their pitching depth. I think they can use one reliever, and then probably someone like Carrasco gets moved to the bullpen in the postseason, and that really helps stabilize things as well. Carrasco hasn't been talked about, but Carrasco has been unbelievably dominant this month. And I think you'd probably move him or Walker, depending on how Buck Showalter feels come end of September, October. But probably I would guess Carrasco probably gets moved to the bullpen, and then you probably hope the Mets probably bring in one relief arm right now, and that you're all set up for the postseason that way. So I think that really can help them more so than a bat. Although not that it's not a need for them, but I think relief pitching, getting that one relief pitcher, and then maneuvering the pieces that you already have will be more of a help to them currently.
Yeah, and then you look back at 2019 from Tyler. 2019 was the last time that when Jacob deGrom was not on the injured list, and then 5 starts in the 2020 60-game season. It's a long time. It's a long, long time. And especially when you're trying to go for it, it's a one giant question mark. Don't get me wrong. You have the depth in your rotation, but God forbid he were to go down. God forbid he were to go down.
Yeah.
It's really, really a tough call. This is the ace. This is the face of your franchise. What do you do? And on top of it, too, in an opt-out year also, listen, he's going to give it his all. There's no doubt about it. But it scares me a bit. And also, they also have Max Scherzer right behind him, too. But is that enough? Enough?
I mean, listen, his first start, I believe, coming tomorrow is going to tell us a lot about DeGrom's health, where it is, and his durability to get through these next, 3-4 months to get the Mets over the line to the postseason in this as a division winner, and through, hopefully, in their point of view, a successful postseason run all the way to the World Series. We'll see a lot tomorrow. Tomorrow will answer a lot of questions, to see where he is, his health, where his pitches are, his command and whatnot, and, how big of a factor he's going to be right away for the Mets going forward. And, they're going to need him to be that ace. And like I said, if they are completely healthy, especially in a shorter series, of course, it's the same way for when you get to the NLCS and the World Series, but certainly in once you get to the playoffs, Matt Scherzer and Jacob deGrom as your game 1 or 2 starters, there's not going to be a better 1-2 punch in the postseason picture on either the American League or National League side than those two. It's just, can they get there with those two 100% healthy? Scherzer hasn't had as much of an issue. We saw the oblique be a problem, but he hasn't blinked ever since coming back off the injured list. DeGrom, we're going to see what is there any lingering issues with him starting tomorrow.
Well, also just to conclude our Mets, our Jacob deGrom talk, of course, he says, I don't believe run support is an excuse anymore with the current Mets lineup. They produce runs and keep themselves in games more often than having to rely on the bullpen to bail them out for the 2-1 scrappy win. I agree completely. And again, we do remember also when the Mets were first in batting average a few months ago as well. 265 batting average was the best in all of Major League Baseball, and also 2-out hits as well for Jeff McNeil, who, by the way, hit a 2-out single early on before Starling Marte brought in a couple of runs. This is definitely a different Mets team, but again, they need some backhanded or back end of the bullpen work, even front end of the they just need general bullpen help because Ottavino and Diaz will not be available every single night. Due to time constraints, it looks as if we actually do have one more comment here from Tyler. It looks as if that he disagrees with you, Mike. I don't think that tomorrow is a telltale sign of what will come. Don't forget that this will be his first look at Major League Baseball pitching since pre-All-Star break 2021. I think it is fair to give him one quote-unquote tune-up game to get back into the rhythm. Mike?
Well, very true, but you'll certainly, of course, see the tweet saying, oh, how his command is, and he's up to this pitch count and whatnot. I wouldn't be surprised if Buck Showalter probably gives him a 3 to 4 inning outing. Doesn't push him all the way. Maybe they have a pitch limit. Maybe it's a 60 to 70 pitch count limit on him or whatnot. But certainly, if there's no issues Tuesday, I think you do give it one start. Then the next start, you see him do really well, have no issues and whatnot. You start getting much more optimistic as a Mets fan about his health. It's not the whole season anymore that he'd have to go. You're just hoping for him to get through the next couple of months.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely see what happens tomorrow with the Mets. Right now, they're playing the Nationals. They're winning 3-1. That was the last I had checked. They were winning 3-1. So we'll take a peek and make sure that is. They're actually up 4-1 against the Nationals. And the Yankees are up 5-1 against the Seattle Mariners, bottom of the third. So good news here in New York baseball, just generally New York baseball. Everything looks good so far. Things are continuing to progress, and it looks as if also, Mike, that right now the trade deadline rumors and deals happening have taken a little bit of a screeching halt right now. So again, 901 will probably see the greatest trade ever happen. That'll shake up the world of baseball. Would not be surprised if that does happen, but we'll have to just wait and see later on in our broadcast. The Mets, though, Mike, they've won their last 6. They head into a 4-game set with the Braves starting on Thursday. Very big deal. They look good. They've won 6 straight. And they are, really, again, they at one point had an 8-game advantage in the NL East. Now they're only 3 games up. Right now they're doing what they've got to do, but it's getting a little bit tricky for the Mets. They need to continue winning. They have the defending World Series champs on their tail.
I mean, this is going to be a really big week for the Mets. We talked about a couple weeks ago when they faced the Braves in Atlanta, and they did really well, taking 2 out of 3 down there. They now have, I believe, a very unconventional 5-game series with the way the schedule wound up shaping up and whatnot. So from Thursday to Sunday with the doubleheader on Saturday, this is going to be a really interesting series. This is once again, just like it was last month, a really big series for the Mets, which it could be a chance for Atlanta to get back in the division race and really grab hold of the NL East again. Or it could be the chance for the Mets to really squash Atlanta in the division race and grab a stranglehold on the NL East. And you're talking about, let's say, you take 3 of 5, 4 or 5 and whatnot. You're talking about a 6-7 game advantage.
You look and say to yourself now, with this Mets lineup too, Mike, with the tweaks or whatever the case may be, if there are any tweaks also, how that could come into effect against the Braves too. And again, if they were to potentially win that series, they would be at least between 4 and 5 games up on the Braves, and that could make things a little bit more dicier heading into September, into the month of September, which again, it's already August 1. So things are already getting nuts.
Yeah, it wouldn't end the NL East race, but it certainly would give the Mets a huge advantage if they wind up winning this series next week.
Yeah, absolutely. And then keep in mind too, they also have after the 4-game set Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday against the Braves, Mike, they also have 4 more down in Atlanta. It looks to be the 15, 16, 17, 18. They've got 4 games down in Atlanta, and then they end the season down in Atlanta.
Yeah.
They end the season with 3 straight down in Atlanta. That's something that's fantastic. 7 games after the 4. So they've got 11 total games. And I personally believe that, again, when you have this 4-game setup coming, it's definitely possible that you could make strides with that. Can it be an NL East unofficial clincher? I don't think so. You still have way too many games to go, especially against the 2 top teams going head to head for that division crown. That could be a big deal and will most likely tell us who will win the NL East on the final day of baseball on October 2nd. Pretty crazy stuff. So let's continue on here with our trade deadline talk. One last thing that we want to discuss, of course, Mike. We want you to, again, air out your grievances because the New York Yankees went 500 in the month of July. Mike, air out your grievances. Talk about what you think that the Yankees needed to do in order to not go 500. What spoiled Yankees fan are you?
So yeah, I guess I am spoiled. They didn't keep up their they didn't keep up their really strong pace that they had through the first half, and it was a bit of a shakier July in which the offense not named DJ LeMahieu, Aaron Judge, and/or to a certain extent Anthony Rizzo,
Boo-hoo.
inconsistent and whatnot. Yeah, but the starting rotation and the relievers and whatnot be a little more inconsistent. Jordan Montgomery hasn't had a great month. Jameson Taillon had a real good start last time out, but besides from that one start, had a ERA in the 5 or 6s in the month of July or ever since the end of June. So certainly a concern there. Clay. I don't want to get overreactionary with this because I've seen this a lot on Twitter about Clay Holmes. He had 2 bad outings this month. Had to really grind through a couple of other tough outings and whatnot.
It's okay. We know you want to ship
little bumps and scratches and all, but please let's not start what I've seen on Yankees Twitter about trying to move Clay Holmes out of the closer role. I'm blowing my head off about seeing those comments. My God, 2 bad outings. It's like, well, it's been more than 2 bad outings. Yeah. Well,
did you contribute to that, Mike? Did you contribute to that? Did you add fuel to that fire?
To the Clay Holmes moving out of the closer role fire? Absolutely not. And I heard that I had to pass one comment, and I'm sorry, I forgot who I had to pass. I passed one comment where it said, "Oh yeah, put Chapman back in there," and you know how I felt about that one. I can't believe, yes, he's had to grind through a couple of rough outings. His command hasn't looked the same and whatnot in the month of July, but it's really just his ERA and his performances have really been skewed by 2 bad outings. I'm not giving up on Clay Holmes yet or whatnot, but you've seen some bumps and cracks in the Yankees team overall in July and whatnot, and they have a tough month of a schedule here in the month of August, to get through a couple of games to try and finish off Boston in the AL East, who certainly plays them tough no matter what the record is. You're playing the Mariners starting tonight, which again, they'll face Luis Castillo on Wednesday, and they'll probably face him again a little later on in the month. They're facing the Cardinals, of course, who are really strong in the NL Central. You'll have the Rays, the Blue Jays, who are really hot this month, the Subway Series resuming. So, it's not an easy month, and you're certainly going to think now with these deadline acquisitions, they're going to have to start picking it up again. Not like it doesn't have to be first half paced, of course not. I don't want to go all spoiled Yankee, all spoiled entitled Yankee fan here, but certainly we saw some issues this month with the Yankees that they'll certainly have to, clean up. But it keeps on getting fun. Just talking about the team there, it keeps on getting fun. Just watch the home run ticker on Aaron Judge keep on going up and continue this historic season that he's having. And they really made some good deadline acquisitions. Now they just have to go out in the postseason and do it. It would be a real shame from the Yankees' point of view if they didn't come away with anything with this historic season that Judge has been on.
That is definitely 100% something that we can all ride on the bandwagon for. All Yankees fans, myself included, we can all hop on that train and say that it would be a massive disappointment if the Yankees do not, first off, win the World Series. Plain and simple. DJ LeMahieu, as you wrote here, he's been hot, 336 in his last 30 games, 5 dingers, 13 ribbies. Aaron Judge, he's up to 43 home runs after tonight. He's one of the reasons why it's 5-1. Anthony Rizzo is another reason why it's also 5-1 too. So, we're going to hold it off there, Mike.
I will say one last note before we move along, Joey. The one interesting thing about the Yankees trade deadline and whatnot, you and I, the way we're following everything and the names and whatnot, Lou Trevino to Jose Trevino is going to be a really interesting one
for
the broadcasters to get out there and for the box score and whatnot, and that's going to be really interesting. Trevino to Trevino when they winds up matching up on the mound.
Well, it's very funny because we've heard a lot of times too from David Cohn. Actually, he calls Jose Trevino Trevino. Now we don't see the ñ in the Spanish language. I think, again, someone correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's the ñ. I forgot the exact. It basically it gives you that the ñ. Trevino.
Roll your tongue, Joey, on that.
Yeah, no, I forgot. I'd have to go back to 8th grade Spanish class and see and see what the name of that is. I think I have those books, but they're growing dust on it. But again, if those folks out there, they obviously see Trevino and Trevino, but they're going to notice also that with Lou Trevino's last name, no relation, mind you, Trivino. For Jose Trevino, it's Trevino. Don't know if there's an ñ on top of the last N or the only N, Trevino. Yeah, I don't think so, but we'll see. Let's keep on moving forward here, Mike, just because, due to lack of time, we still have a ton to talk about. Tomorrow, we're going to be discussing a lot on the Instant Reaction segment number 19. Please be sure to tune in and keep up with our social media at Observe Eastern. Please be sure to check on the bottom of your screen. On that bottom line, it'll tell you where to follow and also who to follow as well. We have our social media there. We always retweet. And, of course, to our YouTube page as well. It says it all right on the bottom there, too. And, of course, at the end of the show, we'll be giving you pretty much every single place where you can follow us. We'll actually do that right now. We can always do that at any point. Be sure to subscribe to the Primetime Rundown, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Odyssey, and, of course, on YouTube by searching the Eastern Observer on YouTube. So, again, if there are folks that want to take a peek at the Instant Reaction podcast, please do. That would be a ton of fun. Thank you so much for doing that and hitting that subscribe button, because we will be on the air tomorrow night breaking down the aftermath of Major League Baseball trade deadline, which, Mike, we did hear a few days ago that potentially could be one of the wildest trade deadlines in a long, long, long time. And we will be chasing it down and staying all over it. That's what we will be doing. Let's keep on moving forward here. And let's get the actual rundown together here. Let's go to the NFL. And there was a lot in the world of the National Football League. Mike, keep in mind first, on the positive side of things, this Thursday, the Hall of Fame game already. The Jacksonville Jaguars and the Las Vegas Raiders already. Summer is almost over, Mike. Please stay down there where it's warm. God.
Yeah, I mean, summer is just going fast. I mean, today's August 1st. It's just absolutely unbelievable how fast this summer is going. And, just in the matter of 3 weeks, a month, we're talking about fantasy football and the football season all over again. And as happy as everybody will be about the football season coming back, it means the end of summer, which I truly hate.
Yeah, absolutely. And also keep in mind, too, that's also why I can't stand also my birthday, too. I'm an August 22nd baby. I cannot stand my birthday. I actually have, and, this doesn't really deal with any sports or anything like that, but for those that don't know, my girlfriend and I, Gina, we share a birthday, August 22nd. And every single year, we've been dating for about 5 years now, and every single year I've always been miserable, whatever, because I can't stand the birthday, right? But this year it's going to be different because I'm not even celebrating my birthday. Any cake, any dinner, my birthday is not even going to be mentioned. It's her birthday, and that's it. Because the end of summer, and I would always say, oh, school's a couple of weeks away, and now that we work in college athletics, sports is already starting, and that's it. That means we got to bring out the snowblower, we got to bring out whatever. It's really tough. But Again, the positive, Mike, you brought that up. Football is back. And of course, the Hall of Fame, the Hall of Fame game as well on Thursday. We brought up Jacksonville, Las Vegas. It doesn't really matter. We're not going to be seeing Trevor Lawrence. We're not going to be seeing any Derek Carr. But next Tuesday, I believe, is the start of preseason already in terms of the schedule. It's truly insane. Just by looking also at, or rather next Thursday, Giants, Patriots on NFL Network, Titans, Ravens. So that'll be some cool stuff there. Big NFL news as well today. Deshaun Watson. The judge, Sue Robinson, who was the judge, had said that she recommends a 6-game ban. Now, the NFL can appeal. The NFL can also take it into their own hands and potentially extend it more. They could do that. Now, that's something that we saw all over Twitter is that, well, the judge said this, the NFL said this. No. It was an outside judge that said this, who recommended 6 games, right? And the reason being is because there was not evidence, right? Now, we don't want to get political into this, right? But there were 24 victims that came out and said that Deshaun Watson did things, right? Now, 6 games. Calvin Ridley bet against his own team, gets a year suspension, right? Now, it's not a Pete Rose type thing, right? Because that would have made waves in the NFL. He didn't bet against other teams. He didn't do anything like that, right? Bet his own team, right? 6 games, I think, is an absolute travesty. But I would not be surprised, though, after this ruling, if the NFL will not only appeal, but they might take things into their own hands and go a full year.
You would think so, but we've also seen in the NFL that the punishment has just not been, extremely hefty when it comes to domestic violence, or in this case, sexual assault and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It hasn't been, what you would think would be a normal punishment. I believe a couple years ago, Tyreek Hill, and we got 2 games.
Yep.
Ben Roethlisberger got 6 games way back when, just for one incident. This was 24 accusers, and whether you want to say there's the guilt and whatnot and all that sort of stuff, this ain't a court of law. This is his job. This is his employer and whatnot. And 6 game suspension for all of that is really, to me, just too low. And it's a real travesty that you see other punishments that certainly are not criminal. In Calvin Ridley's case of just betting on his team,
he can't do that either. He can't do that, Mike. That's undermining the integrity of the league at that point.
No, but in terms of like a crime, in terms of like in terms of our outside world, outside the sports world, sort of illegal crime, certainly the betting that Ridley placed was a terrible break of the rule. But compared to domestic violence or sexual assault in this case is a totally different situation. Ridley gets an entire year, and now we're sitting here, Deshaun Watson, with 6 months and whatnot. You would think the NFL would appeal or take it into their own hands and look for a much heftier suspension, but I'm just not confident that we haven't seen that sort of history from Roger Goodell and the league.
Yeah, and you look and say to yourself too, when we remember Adrian Peterson, right? And I'll never forget many years ago. I'll never forget many years ago when I worked at Modell's, which doesn't exist anymore, obviously. We had gotten some Adrian Peterson jerseys, right? And we had gotten one. I wish I had the photo. I think I still have it somewhere, maybe on my old phone. A Peterson jersey. The Peterson was upside down, right? And they had recalled it, right? Not too long after the light switch scandal, right? And we remember that was September of 2014, I believe. And then November of 14, he was effectively, his contract was terminated by the Vikings. He was suspended by the NFL. He didn't play again for the rest of that season. Then I don't believe he played for another, little while. And that effectively ended his time with the Vikings. That was it. But I remember when we saw that, And I could not believe what I heard when he was pretty much deactivated for a game. And then a couple of months later, after video evidence of this man with a light switch to his son, it to me, it doesn't make sense to me. I understand the rage, the anger, and we're not trying to make this a therapeutic session here on the Primetime Rundown. But the bottom line here is that if you do that, that's not a father figure.
Mm-hmm.
And I have my own sets of father figure issues. Well, you don't get into that. That'll be a therapy session which people can subscribe to by DMing me if they want to.
Yeah.
The bottom line, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's just we've seen an exception here or there, I guess, but it's just really not been a historical precedent in the NFL of really coming down hard on domestic violence or sexual assault and whatnot. And listen, this isn't to not go deep into it, this isn't a court of law. It's not going to a grand jury as it looks like, but certainly there's a different burden of proof when it comes to dealing with his employer and whatnot. And Watson's, settled civilly outside of court with pretty much all of his accusers.
And that's when I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mike, but that's also when you know that things are, all right, we don't want this to get out of hand.
Mm-hmm.
Use it with money. That's it.
Yep, that's exactly what it is. So, you would think there would be more of a punishment than just 6 games. And given the fact of the other actions that we mentioned that are far less severe than what, Watson is accused of, and yet, he's getting just 6 games, not even a full season for this action or, supposed action. And, certainly, we've seen the talk, we could speculate all we want. Maybe something happened, maybe it didn't. Maybe at best, something, not great happened. Something really reprehensible happened. We don't know what degree to it was, but certainly that many accusers and certainly him settling, every which way certainly doesn't, bode well for his case of complete and total 100% innocence. But you just think that 6 games, that's it. And this is for a league that, again, it's a historical precedent that they have not come down hard on this category of violations and whatnot. And it's going to be a conversation that follows Watson for the rest of his career. And not only that, he did not get a huge suspension here. I mean, it was like nothing. The Cleveland Browns gave him the highest guaranteed money of any player in NFL history, and now they'll have a $250 million contract on the cards for the next couple years, regardless of Watson's issues off the field.
Yeah, and now when you look and say to yourself also, do you remember Ray Rice doing the same thing too? That was earlier. That was back in February of 2014 when that all happened. That was in the Revel Casino, which does not exist anymore. Keep that in mind. Revel does not exist anymore. Yes, that was a long time ago. That's now Ocean, by the way. In that elevator, he was throwing his wife and whatever it is, or his fiance or whatever it was, and that was caught on camera. TMZ got a hold of it, and he only was suspended 2 games. 2 games. 2 games. 2 measly games. Now, he said, and not Ray Rice, but Roger Goodell eventually said that he, quote, didn't get it right. Yeah, you're right. He didn't get it right, but the Baltimore Ravens got it right. They effectively ended his career by doing that. He didn't get another shot after that. That was it. And keep in mind...
that's the thing is that even though Goodell said those comments back then, we certainly haven't seen the right being wronged since then when it comes to this category of issues.
Yeah, and also with Tyreek Hill. We remember this too. Back, I think it was 2014 again. Brutal year. He threw his girlfriend around, quote unquote, like a rag doll. Punched her in the face, sat on her, and repeatedly punched her in the stomach and choked her. End of story there. Now for the Browns, though, Mike. The first 6 games, bearing there's not much more that the NFL will do. where do the Browns go from here?
Yeah, in terms of on the field, you figure that the Browns were holding on to Baker Mayfield much longer because they were covering for potential Watson suspension, but then they did ultimately deal him, and he went to the Carolina Panthers. So it's where do the Browns really go from here in terms of their quarterback position? There's not a lot of options. Will they look to some sort of quick trade from here? They'll have to rely on a third stringer or whatnot, signing someone. It's I don't know where they're going to go, but it's going to be a really interesting question. And I think it's really going to hurt them in this season. They're going to be in a really strong competitive division. The AFC North is always a tough division to go through, and the AFC is already supremely deep as a conference overall, with tons of young, dynamic quarterbacks and up and coming teams. You lose Watson to the suspension, which was expected, but then they did send away their backup plan in Mayfield, who was not great by any means, but certainly you looked great 2 years ago, and you thought could provide at least some stable presence before Watson came back, or they figured out a longer term solution if we're really going last resort and whatnot. But it's a real tough conversation. I'm going to find out in the preseason, maybe if they make a signing or two here or there to try and fill the quarterback position.
Yeah, it's really tough to say also because right now they've got Jacoby Brissett on the roster who was scheduled or who was supposed to be the number 2. Now we expect Brissett to be the number 1. And also the Browns did bring in Josh Rosen as well, former first-round draft pick, who's we know is obviously a bust from 4 years ago at UCLA. We now know that it looks as if that the Browns were preparing for this possible decision here. Now, you look at some names being thrown around the league, Mike, and you say to yourself, well, it's very tough to say with Jimmy Garoppolo, how things have gone in San Francisco. They're ready to move him. And then you look and potentially say, well, could they trade for him if they really wanted to go for it? I don't expect that. What do you see here with the possibility of this Brissett-Rosen duo that is most likely going to be for the whole season?
Well, it's interesting. Good spot there with those two being on the roster, but I think it's going to be a really interesting quarterback competition. Rosen hasn't stuck anywhere in the NFL, as you mentioned, a real bust. Brissett obviously hasn't been able to land in the NFL, but he does have experience, with Bill Belichick and the Patriots backing them up and whatnot. He was a starter for a time with the Indianapolis Colts, so he does have some starter experience. And if you're the Browns, I would say probably right now they're probably going to go with Brissett as their starter. And unless something drastically changes with Watson's punishment as of right now, at least play it out for the first 6 games and hope they have a solid enough record that Watson comes in and just plays really well and tries to put some of the punishment to bed in their perspective.
Now the thing to me is that, and I know we've brought this up to outside of our group, Mike. We've spoken about the possibility too about Jimmy Garoppolo being connected with the New York Giants, but we'll get to that in a few short moments. Is there a possibility too that Jimmy Garoppolo could potentially get a look? And the reason why I say this is because he's due about $25 million this season, but he's an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year. Do the Browns want to potentially go down that route and go for it all, or do they rely on those two?
I think you have to go for it. I mean, this is a year where, again, the AFC is really deep. The division is going to be strong once again, but again, you have question marks. The Steelers, of course, post Big Ben. Of course, the Ravens, how are they going to be with Lamar Jackson coming off of injury? They've really shaken up their offense as well. It's really going to be run heavy once again, unless you have some draft picks or whatnot really develop. So I mean, it's really it's a deep conference. and
Yeah.
you're really going to leave a lot of uncertainty in Brissett and Rosen, who really have not stuck at the NFL level at all, no matter where they've gone. They have a roster that's ready to compete. They, want to get back to where they were, 2 years ago, where they got into the playoffs. They really gave Kansas City a run for their money in the divisional round. So you want to go for Jimmy Garoppolo, who we've talked about it plenty during football season. Um, Jimmy G's not the greatest out there and whatnot, but he is a winner. You look at his win-loss record, he's able to produce well enough to be able to get teams the necessary wins and whatnot. And I think in terms of on the field perspective, he puts the Browns in good positions to win, a good bunch of their first 6 games and then hand the keys over to Watson.
Yeah, it's very possible. Now, who knows what would happen there, and it would be obviously very weird to see him as a backup, especially after going through all of this, through all this drama and really what he's accomplished in San Francisco, which when you look at it, it's not much, especially when they made it to the playoffs. And they made it to the Super Bowl. Of course, they didn't win it, but when they made it there, you had a lot of Raheem Mostert there as well. Who really carried the load. Continuing on, Mike, going back to the San Francisco to the Bay Area, of course, Deebo Samuel re-signed with San Francisco, massive extension. And again, that's a fantastic weapon that now Trey Lance will be hoping to really get to use. And there's a lot of bonuses stuck in there as well in that contract, because there have been times when Deebo Samuel, he's a rusher too. He can play running back as well. How good of a deal is this for San Francisco?
Yeah, I mean, it needed to get done. I mean, Deebo Samuel was a fantastic weapon last year for them, a large part of their offense, especially when George Kittle has struggled with some injury issues the last 2 years. Really, he hasn't been able to get through a full season, has been in and out. So Deebo Samuel's been a huge part of their offense and the offense they've been able to generate. So they had to get this done. I'm sure Deebo, they got certain incentives in or whatnot because of him being a runner. It's going to really punish his body a lot more. The different ways that they want to put him in the offense and be creative with how he's utilized. Of course, we talked about it with Kyle Madsen a couple months ago. They're going to have to put some financial assurances in there to satisfy Deebo, and a little bit more of an unconventional role where he's a little bit of a smaller guy, and there are times they're lining him straight up in the backfield as a traditional running back, to get a couple yards here and there, or they pitch it to him and whatnot. And then the next play, they'll wind up, having him, one-on-one with the best cornerback there and, grab a 25-yard pass or whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, he's been donned as a wide back, the hybrid role, that first team all-pro confidence that he brings day in and day out that we continuously see. And Kyle Shanahan calls him, the head coach for the San Francisco 49ers, calls him a special player. Mike, this is what Deebo Samuel earned, a 3-year extension through 2025 that is believed and now is officially confirmed, up to $73.5 million, and includes $58.1 million in guarantees. Now, as we brought up too, there's a lot of the certain conditions or certain incentives too. I believe it's $2 million off the life of the contract if he meets certain rushing yards, rushing touchdown marks. And this is really a fantastic deal. And what John Lynch has done in San Francisco, it looks good. It looks really good. But he is a Swiss Army knife on the offensive side of things. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, they needed to be able to keep him. They get a real strong. They retain a really strong offensive piece, and what's really going to be it's going to be a strong NFC West division once again. It's arguably one of been the best division in football the last couple of years. Of course, you have the Super Bowl winning Los Angeles Rams. Seattle, maybe what are they doing? They certainly got a lot of question marks at the quarterback position.
Oh yeah.
Kyler Murray was just signed to a big extension, which we'll get to. So Arizona, of course, big time contender. So right there, of course, 3 out of 4 teams really strong in what they're, really set in what they're doing and trying to be Super Bowl contenders. Arizona, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. They needed to keep Deebo Samuel, a fantastic weapon for them, and hopefully, if George Kittle is healthy for pretty much the entire year, it gives them that great 1-2 punch in the offense.
Yeah, absolutely. And where's Kyle Madsen when you said about Arizona being competitive? My man Cliff Kingsbury, and also of course Kyler Murray too. We'll get to that contract in a little bit. But before we do that, we're going to stay in the Bay Area and we're going to go back to our chat about Jimmy G because he was connected to the New York Giants. Mike, for you, what do you see there? Do you believe that there is a potential for that where the Giants could potentially go for Jimmy G? Don't know how it makes a lot of sense because he's got just this year left. Could it be something really like a would he do that though also like in a backup role? Would he get in there as a starter? Would he be mentoring Daniel Jones? What do you expect there?
It would seem like a pretty expensive mentorship for them to be taking on Jimmy G, if that's what it would be. I don't know, because really, what do you expect as a Giants fan? What do you expect out of this Giants team this year, really, under first year head coach Brian Daboll? You really just are looking for Daniel Jones to step up now with a third head coach and whatnot. You're looking for him to step up in his final year of his, it's a 50-year option rookie deal and whatnot. You're looking for him to finally take that step up and bring this Giants offense, back from out of the dead and try and give some hope to this team, in this, long-term rebuild that they've been on, coach after coach the last couple of years. So
Yeah,
you hope Jones really takes that step up, and then at most, you really want them to be competitive and, in a really, bad division in the NFC East, what it's been the last couple of years, try and maybe grab a wild card spot if you want to hope. That's the extent of what the Giants maybe can be capable of this year. You're hoping as a Giants fan, that's your best hope. But, at the worst, you're probably thinking, as a front office point of view, this is just a building year for Brian Daboll and whatnot to instill his culture, to instill his philosophy, how he wants to run the team, and for Daniel Jones to take the next step and whatnot. I don't know if acquiring Jimmy G really fits that model. He's a guy who can, like we talked about before, he keeps you really competitive in a game, a real good win-loss record. Can get you some solid wins here and there. And, that would represent a move that the Giants would be really going for it, to try and, I guess go for it in this division, which in the NFC East, we've seen the last couple of years hasn't been that great, and try and nab one of the final 1 or 2 postseason spots. I don't know if that's really the mold of what the Giants should really be going for. It should be looking just to build under Daboll and try and instill that culture and philosophy. I think we said Garoppolo's owed $25 million this year. That would really be an expensive mentorship for them to take if you just come in and be a backup for Jones. If they want someone to come in and purely do that, they can go to a number of different routes for that, or sign somebody off a practice squad or something like that to try and do that sort of stuff. If they're bringing in Jimmy G, their aim is to be really, really competitive and to try and, it may sound strange, but to try and win this division, which hasn't been, really dominating the last couple of years.
Which to me doesn't make a lot of sense. And again, going to now our good friend Brian Morales, Director of Media Relations at Wagner College, going back to a previous point, if Wilson struggles, Zach Wilson, because Brian is a Jets fan, Joe Douglas, go get Jimmy G. Why not? Not like we are playing for anything big this year as the Jets. or he'll let him sign with the Giants. Sorry, Joey.
Well, the thing about the Jets and Giants talk on that one, the Jets certainly have a lot more space on the payroll to play around with a Jimmy G experiment in that situation than the Giants certainly do after the mess that Dave Gettleman left them in financially.
Exactly.
So the Jets would be in a lot more of a position to do that. But I mean, both New York teams are in the same position that, Wilson is much more newer to the NFL than Jones, but you're really just hoping for the younger quarterbacks to step up and just continue to build. And you saw a lot of good signs from the Jets last year, and this you want it to be another step up. I think Douglas is they've utilized a lot of high draft picks the last couple of years, building real good pieces on both sides of the ball. Is this the year they really want to go for it? And like you said, if Wilson does struggle, Jimmy G is a guy who makes your team relatively competitive. I think maybe that fits the Jets mold just a little bit more than the Giants financially and on the field.
Yeah, it's definitely possible to see. And again, for me, my final thought about it is that I don't know financially how it would work. I remember too with the Giants when they cut James Bradbury, when they cut other players, they traded away other players. It simply did not work. The dead cap space that the Giants have this year is really bad. And Mike, you said it too, is that the mess that Dave Gettleman, you put it perfectly, the mess that Dave Gettleman left, I guess we can call it, left the Giants in, is really a bad spot. Let's look now and see what the dead cap is here. Logan Ryan, 11 million, James Bradbury, 9 million, Nate Solder, 4 million, Kyle Rudolph, 2.5. They've got $29.2 million in dead cap. Now, the issue also is that when you look at every single team around the NFL and you say to yourself, all right, how much cap space do these teams have? The Giants have a grand total of $6 million left. Unfortunately, it's not going to work, ladies and gentlemen. It's not going to work. It would not make any sense if they were to do that. You also look at what Cleveland has. They still have $48 million in cap space. 48.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, you have to go for it here. Cleveland is a no-brainer of a no-brainer of a spot, of a location.
Yeah, you have the space, and going back to what I said before, you really have faith in a combination of Brissett or Rosen, who just really have not stuck at the NFL level, no matter where they've gone for a long period of time. So bring in someone like Jimmy G, who at least will fill the void for now.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's keep on moving forward here. And for the sake of time, too, we are going to get to our sports update here. Now, we got a chance to see, we'll be talking more about hockey. We'll be talking more about Major League Baseball, the trade deadline. Of course, it is trade deadline eve. But a sports update, too, ladies and gentlemen, a really tough one to pass along. We did hear it yesterday. Bill Russell, one of the greatest basketball players of all time, in my opinion, my top 5, has passed away at the age of 88 yesterday. One of the best Boston Celtics that we've ever gotten to see. 11-time NBA champion. The number 6 has been, lit up in the in TD Garden, and we can almost guarantee that there will be a patch that the Boston Celtics will be wearing entering the 2022-23 campaign. Really tough to see. A lot of good memories of Bill Russell. He's one of the biggest, no pun intended, literally, literally, not figuratively, or both, if you will. One of the best ambassadors for basketball, for the game of the NBA, for the game of basketball in general. Everything. Bill Russell was just a winner from top to bottom. He will be dearly missed. And me as a Lakers fan, regardless of what he did for the Celtics, again, 11-time NBA champion. He is nothing but a winner. Rest in power, Bill Russell. Let's keep on moving forward here. We continue on, of course, the infamous Jack Curry, who did say, he looks like he just tweeted it a couple of moments ago, it looks as if that Joey Gallo will not be a New York Yankee past tomorrow. And we can actually say, Mike Szabo, you were the one that caught that.
Yeah, I believe Curry tweeted out a little bit a while ago. He was joining the Yankee broadcast in the middle of the fifth inning to talk a little bit about trades and whatnot, and just hearing, seeing from Talking Yance, John Boy, and the guys, looks like he is saying that Curry, Jack Curry, that is saying that Joey Gallo won't be a Yankee by this time tomorrow. So we'll see, what sort of deal that looks like, where does he go, and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. We also have a lot of other deals going on, too, within Major League Baseball, other deals in the NHL, other deals in the NBA, other deals in the NFL, lots of things going elsewhere. And, of course, we will save you the best for last. The St. John's Red Storm non-conference schedule came out. We will not go into detail. We'll eventually have an article for you on the EasternObserver.com, and also the UConn non-conference schedule came out as well. Keep that in mind, too, ladies and gentlemen. Pretty much the only headline there we could say, the St. John's schedule got that much better. Or here, we could do that in the white. Got that much better. The UConn schedule looks fantastic, by the way. Should be a fun non-conference schedule for both teams, and a fun non-conference season for both teams, most notably the UConn Huskies. Mike, let's keep on going here, and let us get to our kudos. You are up first, sir.
Yeah, so building off of last week's kudos, of course, we got to see yesterday, and of course, our legendary figure in the St. John's women's soccer world, Rachel Daly, as a starting left back, played 88 minutes, go on to win the European Championship with the England women's national team, taking down Germany in an eventual 2-1 extra time win. As I said, Rachel Daly played 88 minutes of that eventual win. Just a fantastic accomplishment for her and the entire England women's team. Just want to give out kudos to them for a fantastic performance in the tournament and a fantastic win for England soccer overall, which has not seen a trophy on the men's or women's side since 1966.
Well, I'm very surprised that you didn't take my kudos. Very surprised you didn't take my kudos, Mike. And you know exactly where I'm going. Say it again.
I knew you were going to take it, so he saved
it. Yes. Playing nice. Thank you very much. Well, our good friend Connor McGlynn, his brother Jack is a rising star in the world of football, in the scheme of soccer here in the United States. At some point, Mike, I know you and I texted about this, we expect to see him in the Premier League. He scored his first MLS goal against, I think it was against Houston. Was that against Houston, I believe? Or let's take a peek and see. It's for the Philadelphia Union. Let's take a peek and see.
Set up by the Dynamo. It's McGlynn's the shot. Go! McGlynn!
Now, keep in mind, Jack McGlynn, I know his older brother, Connor, obviously, from my time in USL League 2, but how old is Jack? And I know you know that family very well, too, since you both hail from the same area.
I believe he's 18 or 19 now. I listen, not that they'll remember it, but I remember like a long time ago when I used to play for Gotchi way back when. I mean, Jack was so little compared to everybody else, and literally was just running around the field, dribbling around everybody. I mean, it's fantastic, from afar, seeing how he's grown and now into the MLS and whatnot. It's getting his first goal. I mean, just absolutely fantastic for him. Not only getting his first goal this weekend, but just in the fashion that he got it in. What a fantastic strike there.
Yeah, what a job there on a free there by Jack McGlynn. And I did text Connor and tell him to say congratulations to his brother. That's truly remarkable to see all of that come to fruition. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot thank you all enough for making us a part of your Monday night. Be sure to tune in next week for another edition of the Primetime Rundown. But until then, please be sure to subscribe to our show by searching the Primetime Rundown on the following platforms: Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Odyssey. And of course, if you would like to see our beautiful faces on YouTube, please be sure to search the Eastern Observer or simply search the Primetime Rundown. Also, ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow, our good friends from the Essential Wrestling Podcast will be bringing you episode number 112 tomorrow, August 2nd, beginning at 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Be sure to take a peek at what Al Carl, John DeConnie, John Smith, and Gary Mehefe have in store for you for all things wrestling. And of course, this past Saturday was SummerSlam out in Nashville. So they also had a lot of good stuff to talk about, and we will definitely take a peek next week because, Mike, it is the football previews that will be beginning. And we can tell you this, our good friend John DeConnie from the Essential Wrestling Podcast will be joining us, as well as Josh Adams. So we'll be having the AFC and the NFC North next week, and continue to follow us on social media for the rest of the schedule that we will be presenting every single week. For Mike Szabo, ladies and gentlemen, Joey Jarzynka, our good friend Ian Schraier on extended assignment. We will see you all next week right here on the Eastern Observer and the Blackjack Media Group. So long, everybody, and enjoy the beginning of August.